I'll give it a few seconds and then we get started. And actually, one thing that I learned is that the netiquette of online meetings is to start sharp on time. Who is in, who is out, well, will join us later, ideally. So, hello everybody. My name is Stefano Tempesta. I'm connecting from Melbourne, Australia. So a long way, but it's really a pleasure to be here and share with the Dynamics UG community. I'm a big fan and contributor of CRM UG, D365 UG. I used to be one of the chapter leaders when I was based in Switzerland. Now that I'm in Australia, I have a lot of things to do, and obviously in the last months, the community has developed more and more virtually, which has opened to this opportunity. Otherwise, I will never have a chance from down under to present at a UK-based UG. So excellent opportunity now to be here together, and thank you to all you for joining this session, and obviously to the organizer for hosting it, for making this happen. Now, I've been working with Dynamics 365, Microsoft MVP on Dynamics on business application and on SharePoint, MVP also on Office development for some time. And I'm passionate about bringing solutions together, bringing systems together to create a solution for customers. And not many leverage the capability of Dynamics 365, specifically the customer engagement apps, with SharePoint, the native integration that exists with SharePoint. Look, Dynamics is a beautiful platform. We love it. This is why we are here. But there are some challenges. There are some inefficiencies, and there are some costs also, especially on the storage and security level, that are not indifferent to consider. On the other side, SharePoint is that platform for content management, for document lifecycle management, which Dynamics is not, for obvious reason, and the two can talk to each other. Not just because they are both Microsoft platform, but because there is a native integration that makes this happen. Still, today I'm here to challenge that integration. So what I want to do today is really speak to you about this out-of-the-box Dynamics 365 to SharePoint integration, understand the opportunity in there, understand what use case it addresses, and what are the limitations. What is the impact on cost for storage, which is probably the main reason why you would want to have SharePoint connected to Dynamics for storing documents or attached to your account, to your contact inside SharePoint, because you have a better and cheaper storage, you have versioning, you have workflows at document level, which you wouldn't have on Dynamics 365. For obvious reason, the two platforms are meant for different purposes. But the two platforms, despite being based on a role-based security model, so both have security roles or groups, as they are called in SharePoint, both connect to Azure Active Directory. Two security models don't really match, and they don't transmit or sync automatically when this integration happens. With a risk of exposing documents in SharePoint that are not meant to be accessed by users of Dynamics 365. So then I want to point you to a solution in AppSource that can address these gaps, and share this in the context of a case study, a Microsoft case study. So it's publicly available on Microsoft website, so I'll give you the reference so you can get more information around it. A case study of a large organization that as Dynamics 365, as SharePoint, as a lot of documents, but really a lot of documents, and these documents cost a lot of money if just stored inside Dynamics. So we want to make sure that as ISV, as system integrators, as Microsoft partners in general, we are giving customers the best solution possible with all the tools and facilities that are available out of the box at no extra cost, or in favor of closing these gaps that still exist in this native integration. I invite questions anytime, so feel free to type in the chat. Don't be shy, and yeah, or if you have the possibility to unmute yourself, absolutely be my guest. That will make it even better in the recording of this session. Okay, so what's the story about between Dynamics 365 and SharePoint? Is a marriage made in heaven or what? Well, sort of. There is a good integration for sure, and the reason you want to have documents in SharePoint is to have a better management of these documents, create, edit, version it, the entire document life cycle, attaching metadata. In Dynamics, what you do is upload a document and attach it to an account, to a contact. So that's great. But you probably want to do a little bit more than that. You want to create multiple versions of the same document and keeping the history of changes. And you can't do this in Dynamics. You need to replace the existing document. You want to have approval processes. So when you upload a document in Dynamics, before it goes to be fully visible, you want to have some workflows for approval. So you want to have the capacity of SharePoint to create this sort of workflows. At the same time, you don't want to jump back and forth between Dynamics and SharePoint and try to find your document and try to locate it. Also because the structure is different, right? So in Dynamics, you navigate by entity. Are we calling these tables now, or we're still okay with entities? Because I'm the old school, I'm still calling these entities, okay? So we still navigate through entities in Dynamics, and we access documents entity by entity or record by record. In SharePoint, you don't have entities. You have libraries. You have, oh no, Jessica said that we should call it tables. Damn it. Okay, I'll try my best to say tables. But forgive me if I still stick to entities sometimes. So yes, in SharePoint, we don't have entities and tables. Woohoo! I love it. We have document libraries, we have folders, we have lists, and we have list items, we have files. So how do we match these two? Because they're close related to each other, and but they have different structure, logical structure, but also security-wise, the approach that they take is different. Oops, it started quickly. So what I want to do now, before we jump into showing a bit more of the native integration, is just project this quick video that showcase the reason why Dynamics and SharePoint talk to each other, and why Microsoft built it, and the benefit that it will bring from the voice of the creators of Dynamics and SharePoint.
There are a lot of advantages to connecting Dynamics 365 online and SharePoint, especially if you're already using Office 365. You'll be able to associate documents with a customer's record right from Dynamics 365. So when you're working on an account, you can add a quote or a proposal without opening another app. Depending on their permissions, your team will be able to work on the same documents with you as you work towards the same goal, closing the sale. Another reason to connect Dynamics 365 to SharePoint is so you can take advantage of other apps that also work with Dynamics 365. In this video, we'll show you how to connect Dynamics 365 Online to SharePoint Online. A wizard makes the SharePoint integration easy to set up. In Settings, Document Management, start the SharePoint integration wizard. Choose Next, be sure to choose Online, and then choose Next. Here, you'll need to enter the URL for your organization's SharePoint site. The URL usually looks something like this: contoso.sharepoint.com. Substitute your organization's name for Contoso. Two important details about the URL. It needs to start with HTTPS, which means it's a secure connection. And the organization name needs to match your Dynamics 365 organization name. Then click Finish. And there's one more thing you need to do. Back on the Document Management page, choose Document Management Settings and set which types of records can have documents associated with them. Choose the record types, enter the same site URL again, and then confirm the remaining settings. The system creates your document libraries, and then you're ready to go. Store, share, and organize the documents you need for sales and marketing efforts.
All right, quick video just to show from the voice of the creator of Dynamics how to do the integration. I have to apologize for the American accent. I'm sure that you appreciate much better the Italian accent. All right, so there is a challenge there. You have probably captured a few of these. The guy mentioned that the two organizations have to match. And I'll get there. It's a security precaution, but it's also a limitation. But before speaking of limitation, well, let's focus on the positive side of it. Dynamics 365 apps, in this case, we are talking of sales, customer service, field service, so the traditional customer engagement, although that's not the name, you know, it changes every other month, but you know what I mean. It's the CRM and not the ERP side of Dynamics. So those are the apps that integrate with SharePoint. So those apps and the Microsoft 365 users are not automatically allowed to access the SharePoint site. So you need to grant permissions, and these permissions are different. If you are familiar with SharePoint, SharePoint has a very hierarchical structure of permission that cascade from site collection to site to library or list in general, folders, files. And you can override at each level, assuming you don't exceed some limitations, and then you can set this permission at each individual level. So very hierarchical, very structured permission based on groups, and these groups can be inside SharePoint, so SharePoint groups that have nothing to do with Microsoft 365 groups or Active Directory groups. They are native inside SharePoint, completely isolated from the rest of the world, and no one can talk to them. SharePoint groups, and there are people inside the SharePoint groups, obviously, but as well Active Directory groups. So you can also assign an AD group to a site, a library, a folder, a document, and so on, and grant individual permission. And then each group has a different level of permission, whether you have full control, or you can read only, or you can contribute, and so on. So this granularity, which is the strength of SharePoint, I'm not dismissing at all. I'm just saying that is different than Dynamics, where is entity-driven, is org-driven. There is a concept of owner in SharePoint. There is a concept of an owner, but it doesn't imply anything from a security perspective. It's all about the group that you are part of that drives permissions, rather than, as we know, the user or team ownership for entities in Dynamics. So the two models don't match, and for this reason they don't sync. So what we end up is that we have documents stored in SharePoint that are not protected with the same level of permissions or restrictions that we have for entities or tables in Dynamics. The structure also is one big SharePoint library which contains all the files in there. Because again, there is no logical matching between entity and, oops, I said entity again. Okay, you got it. Between those objects there in Dynamics and folders or libraries in SharePoint. The two concepts are different. One is record-oriented, entity-oriented, okay? I'm going to insist on that. And the other one is document-oriented. So the approach is obviously different. How to match this is something that doesn't exist out of the box. So then you end up having a big library with all these files in there. The library is named after the entity display name, so account, contact, and so on. And that's probably not the way you are organizing your information architecture in SharePoint. Very likely also because the owners, the system owners of the two systems are different. They may be IT owned, but the business owner is different. So whoever owns the dynamic side may have a different opinion from an information architecture perspective than the way you want someone else that owns a document management system to structure their libraries, their folders, and their files. And actually, folders is not even encouraged as a way to structure files. It's more around tagging and metadata in SharePoint rather than replicating a file share Windows Explorer in SharePoint. You're missing the point if you structure your documents in a rigid folder structure inside SharePoint. So hence a big library with all the files in there. Big limitation because it opens access to everybody with permission to see files in the library, unless you override permissions at document level, which is a manual effort and is extremely time consuming. So what else we can do? And I see that there are a few questions coming up in the chat, so I'll close this topic and then I'll capture some of these questions. Let's carry on still on the good, on the benefit of this integration. There is a control access that can be applied to SharePoint, also from an unmanaged device, and also OneDrive. At the end, SharePoint and OneDrive share the same security model because the engine, the backend is the same. So whoever is accessing SharePoint from a system that is not secure, so an unmanaged device, you can apply some policies that are driven by SharePoint to restrict access, and you can set also access level, as you can see with these 3 levels. Allow full access, allow limited access only from the web, or block the access. Only devices that satisfy a trust policy that is defined in SharePoint can access that site and see the document in there. So as you can see, again, the security is shifting to SharePoint, where it's quite strong, I must admit. It's very structured, it's very well defined, which is a good way, is a good thing, no? Because you're using the strongest security model, in my opinion, in this case. At the same time, you are also storing documents inside SharePoint, so the actual storage is SharePoint. But the challenge is different. The challenge is that whoever is consuming these files is still accessing them from Dynamics. So think for a moment. We are using SharePoint for storage because it's cheaper from a storage perspective, and I can store terabytes of data rather than a few gigs as available in Dynamics, unless obviously you buy extra expensive storage. So in that case, it's convenient to use this native integration. But the entry point, so the way you want to consume your file, to open your file, is still very likely by Dynamics. Is for business users that are accessing contact, accounts, leads, and so on. So they don't go into SharePoint. They don't want to go into SharePoint and also navigate a structure that it may be a little bit unfamiliar, non-familiar with what they're used to. But then what's the point of having a strong security model driven in SharePoint if it doesn't match with the one in Dynamics? So I'm trying to, to build up on the limitation. And the other one that you heard before in the short video is that the SharePoint site has to have the same name of the SharePoint org, has to have the same name of the Dynamics 365 organization, has to be on the same tenant. This is officially a security measure, and I get it, but at the same time, it poses a limitation because, well, irrespective of the name itself that have to match, you are limited of integrating system within the same tenant, which are based on the same Active Directory. So some limits, which I summarize, but just let me put on writing on screen for convenience. This native out-of-the-box integration ignores what privileges you have set on Dynamics 365 side. The security model is defined in SharePoint, but still you have to do it. You have to build it. So what happens is that all the files go into one single document library. So if there is a sort of a folder structure that you have to build it, which is driven by the entity name, all the documents are in there. Then if you want to create a nested folder structure for some reason, then you have to do it. If you want to add tags or metadata to documents, it's something is not part of itself. And of course, you can build some nice flows in Power Automate to make this happen. But again, it's not the out-of-the-box capability. You need to build something on top to create this, or to enhance, expand this integration. The very key point of justifying an integration is that cost for storage in Dynamics is significantly higher than in SharePoint. And if you're wondering, because you may not know how much storage you have, you will have to go to your Power Platform Admin Center. Now everything is in Power Platform in there, and you can see the storage capacity per user license. So so if you have let me see if I remember the figure. So you have typically 20 gigabytes for tenant, if I remember correctly, and then an additional 2 gigs for each fully licensed users. So if you have 15 users, you have 50 gigs of storage, which is typically more than enough for most user environments, unless you start growing massively into a space where you really require large volume of data. In that case, SharePoint comes to your help, because if I'm not wrong, it provides 15 terabytes of storage, and then there is 1 terabyte per user, which is the OneDrive allocation as well. So plenty of storage available for you to use. Okay. What are some of the strategies that you may adopt besides, obviously, the last bullet point in this list, not to store documents in SharePoint? You will typically archive some of these old data and remove it from the system, take a backup and put it somewhere cheaper. Or you can configure an LTR policy, long-term retention policy, to automatically back up the Dynamics database to Azure Storage, Azure Blob. You can simply delete data. There are some regulation in some countries, in some regions, to store data up to 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. After that, you don't need it. Just delete it. Simple as that. I have seen customers separating, splitting organizations into multiple orgs. So, okay, I have my company runs in different geographies, different legal entities, different departments. I create a separate Dynamics 365 org for each of these department, business unit, whatever you want to call it. Or obviously store documents in SharePoint. So there are different strategies that you can take, but all of them have an obvious limitation. Now, if you take data out, or obviously if you delete it, you don't have a quick access, or you don't have access at all, which from a reporting perspective may be limiting. You cannot go back in time more than the data that you have. You cannot use some AI capability that relies a lot on historical data for increasing the accuracy of prediction by identifying patterns over historical terms. And obviously, if you separate your organization, you are creating silos where you miss out on the potential of not leveraging a single seamless integration of all your systems and a unified view of your product, your employees, your customer, your line of business. So storing documents in SharePoint makes sense. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of it. But at the same time, I'm aware of these limitations. All right, so let me see a few questions before I move on with the solution part of it, which I want to offer. So scrolling, oh gosh, you guys talk a lot. So let me have a look into the chat here. I'm happy to talk entities. Thank you, me too. Okay, I have a question. I have a customer that wants to use subfolders within the default folder, but I noticed Dynamics doesn't show folders by default. What you would recommendation? I'm getting into the recommendation. So you're right, Dynamics doesn't create a folder structure, it just dump all the files into one library. It's okay, but it's very limiting, especially for those in SharePoint that love to create a proper information architecture. Dumping all the files into one library, they don't like it, and they will tell you. So if there is a way for not doing it, let's explore it, and I'm getting there, obviously. We have used Power Automate to create the folder. Perfect. Yes, so that is a good approach. Thanks for the suggestion, Ben. As I mentioned, you can totally build your Power Automate and build your own logic and structure the file as you want. And not only structure files in this way, but bring some of the metadata that you can use to classify files in SharePoint. That is completely missing in the out-of-the-box integration. The out-of-the-box integration, take the file out of Dynamics and put in SharePoint. Thank you very much. Without permissions, without metadata, without anything else. I need more than that. We live in a very well-connected world. I need more information, not just a link to a file. So Power Automate is definitely a solution. That's a plan too. Okay. We store contract arrays from Dynamics in the associated SharePoint library. Yes. We couldn't stop a non-Dynamics user from viewing them. Exactly right. Exactly my point. Because those who are non-Dynamics users, but they are SharePoint users, have permissions in SharePoint, they can see them. We have to procure Connect Bridge to rip out SharePoint permission and reapply Dynamics one. Is still the right approach? Is absolutely is. So I'm gonna talk exactly about this now. Is there an option with SharePoint integration to have the folder structure by entity or by account? By entity, yes, but not a folder structure. It's a library. Okay, so let's not make confusion on terminology here. We have one library named after the entity, and that's it. And all the files are in there. We have a scenario where two businesses are using the same CDS. Oh. I'm not answering this question unless you rephrase it with Dataverse. but want to split the records within Dynamics. To do this, we have used business unit to secure the record. The issue is that SharePoint integration has no idea what a business unit is. Exactly right, Ben. You get the point, right? So that's the point. We have business unit in Dynamics. We have teams. We have record owners. We have nothing like that in SharePoint. In SharePoint, we have SharePoint groups. We have AD groups. We have site, libraries, folders. The two models, although they are both role-based, they don't talk to each other. I think storing quotes in SharePoint rather than an attachment to an email in activity is more cost-effective and neater. You get the version control as well in SharePoint. You get everything. You get version control, you get metadata, you get enterprise search. You guys have heard about Project Cortex, right? So that is in SharePoint. You have enterprise search across your documents that are visible from Dynamics, but actually in SharePoint. It's wonderful. I love it. It just needs to be protected. That's my point. Does anybody know if it is possible to assign metadata with data from Dynamics? Not out of the box. You need to build something like a Power Automate flow to do this transfer, this sync of metadata. Without using a third-party app. So depending how you see Power Automate, if it's a third-party or not, is a first-party, right? It's Microsoft, but it's still an extra activity to do, not out of the box. Plus, you can just send a link to the quote within SharePoint. Don't have to email the actual file. Yes, and I love this solution because not only you're protecting the file, but you're not exposing potentially sensitive data. Because you can leverage the classification in SharePoint for information protection. So if you classify a file, then it will trigger this protection, not just in SharePoint, but also in Teams. So if you share that file inside Microsoft Teams, or if you send it via email, Microsoft 365 information protection will stop you from doing that, or will give you a warning. So that's always the best approach. And also, you're not sharing a physical file that who knows where it goes. Share the link, enforce authentication to your SharePoint, not make it a public link accessible anonymously, because then whoever wants to access that file needs to authenticate and needs to have the permission to access that file. If one day you don't want to share that file any longer with that person because you don't like them any longer, you just remove the permissions. But if you share a file, the file is gone. So that's the best solution. Thanks, Ben, for sharing. Okay, all right. So let me go into the solution mode of it. And I have a few videos that I recorded just to talk through this process, okay? The case study is Compass Group. Compass Group is let me try to remember, is a large organization with over 500,000 people, operates in over 40 countries. This company manages customer relations using Dynamics 365, integrated with SharePoint for document storage and team collaboration, okay? There's the challenges that we had. So that's the URL. Actually, you know what? Let me share this in the chat so you can access. What's the best way to copy from a live slide? I think I'll go to my to share to not SharePoint. What's the name? PowerPoint, and type this in the chat. So here we go. Is that big enough? Oh, dear God, really? Why came off so big? Sorry. Okay, that's better. All right. Sometimes you love rich text formatting, but sometimes it should be a bit clever. Anyway, So yes, what are the challenges? Well, you can read on screen, and of course you have understood by now, is a full service company, so this Compass Group need to synchronize document access rights between Dynamics and SharePoint. All the access rights were out of sync. Use non-Dynamics users, so that only SharePoint users could access documents that belong to an entity in Dynamics just because they are in SharePoint. It stinks. Then using an automatic replication in real time of these services, of these permissions, then it was possible to manage this restriction. As soon as a document is taken out, is uploaded, taken out of the Dynamics and stored inside SharePoint completely in a seamless experience, then the permissions is copied across and replicated in SharePoint as well. Not just the permission, but also the structure. So you have a full control or enhanced control on where your data is, making your SharePoint admin happy because you are respecting their information architecture structure. And comply also with GDPR, because if sensitive information that you store into Dynamics, assuming that is protected because is inside Dynamics and only people with a Dynamics license with the permission to access their record in Dynamics have access, now suddenly that is open to SharePoint, which typically has a broader adoption than Dynamics. I mean, Dynamics is a backend system where you only have admins or agent to have access, or sales reps, and instead SharePoint is more for the larger intranet. So for every employees and contractors, workers in your organization, potentially even external vendors. So you need to get the security right. And if you don't get it right, you are exposing sensitive data, which will not be going well to the European bureaucrats. I didn't say that. Okay, so what's the solution? The solution is on the left-hand side, you see Dynamics, a list of accounts. I'm connected as Alan. And on the right side, you see Dynamics, list of accounts. I'm connected as Veronica. You can see that Alan can see a lot of accounts. So I'm going to create a new one and I'll give a fantastic name as Megatech. Okay, so this Megatech is a new account that is with Alan, and I'm going to upload a file, this PowerPoint file attached to this account. Refresh the page, I don't see as Veronica, okay, on the right hand side. So Veronica doesn't have access to this account. What happens in SharePoint, so now back to SharePoint, is light blue is SharePoint, is that there is a record created, a folder created after this entity with the actual PowerPoint inside, which we're going to see in a moment. And both Alan and Veronica can actually see it, despite Veronica don't have access to the account in Dynamics. And inside that folder, look at that, there is that PowerPoint also visible to Veronica. So we got this situation. We understand now what the gap is in the native integration. We need to address this. So to address this, I need a way to sync permissions between Dynamics and SharePoint. So I want to create a permission replication that is basically doing exactly this, hiding the file from Veronica and making available to Alan or to Veronica if Alan agrees to do that. So what happens is that basically Alan, going back to Dynamics, decide to share this document, or actually the account is not even a document. He shared the account, this record, with Veronica. Say, hey Veronica, you can access Megatech. So now doing the sharing, going into the list of account for Veronica, quick refresh, Veronica can see Megatech. Wonderful. So then entry is created into the map of these permissions in in the synchronization between the two permissions, and in SharePoint now Veronica can see the folder and the file as expected. So this is working as we will want to be. But now if I remove this visibility, so now giving a refresh, Veronica doesn't see MegaTech any longer. In SharePoint, I expect Veronica not to be able to see the folder and the file inside it. Okay, makes sense? This is what we want to do. And this is what this is the case study that I wanted to share. This is what oh, come on, Compass Group. The name was flipping away. This is what Compass Group did, and it did use a tool available in the app source called Connect Bridge with SharePoint permission replicator. So, and some of you, they already referenced this in the chat. So, but I'm here really not to promote the tool itself, but to make you all aware of the limitations that exist in the native integration between SharePoint and Dynamics 365. The risk, also from a compliance perspective, of not addressing these challenges, the opportunity to make this integration more secure with third-party tools, and the cost savings that you can get also by extracting data, document out of Dynamics and storing inside SharePoint. Now, the story with Connect Bridge is that it doesn't have necessarily be in SharePoint. It can also be in any other storage, but typically I see the natural application of this attachment extraction going from Dynamics into SharePoint. But you know, there are organizations that implement Dynamics and don't implement SharePoint. In that case, you want to consider some other form of storage without deleting data, without backing up data, but keeping data alive inside Dynamics and purely stored externally where storage is cheaper and still retaining all the permissions. This can be an Azure storage, can be any other type of storage that allows also to set security, because at the end you don't want then to recreate a situation where you take documents out of Dynamics and store into a shared drive in your intranet without any sort of protection. So you still want to have a proper protection in place. So that's the story about. Want to keep it simple, want to keep it short, and just give the message very briefly. My social coordinates on screen. If you want to get in touch for a follow-up, want to know a little bit more about this experience, about the tools. As said, my intention here was to highlight the benefit, because there are many, of the native integration and some of the gaps that solutions in app source like Connect Bridge can address, and open up for feedback from all you all that are obviously very experienced in this kind of solutions. Any more questions? So let me go and see in the chat. No, not yet. So there are a few let me see. Given that SharePoint support Azure Active Directory security groups and Dynamics also support AAD security groups for access, that open the doors for give the same set of user access to Dynamics and SharePoint without managing them separately. The opportunity is there, yes. So very good question by, forgive me if I don't say the name right, Zun. Say, because both SharePoint and Dynamics have the same support for AAD groups, so not just SharePoint groups, but Active Directory groups. Can we sort of match them together? I would love to. It just doesn't happen. So we need to make this happen with some sort of automation, automatic sync. You can build up yourself with Power Automate. using the respective APIs, the connectors that already exist. Although the connectors don't give you access to the security model, so you need to use something around calling the proper API. So you need to build the endpoint and authenticate into the endpoint. So it's not that simple. It's not that just drag and drop as we will do in Power Automate. And probably I will look into logic apps for that. But yes, so the approach I would suggest is that I have the experience is on Connect Bridge, which takes care of storage, takes care of folder structure, so you can build the folder structure that you want, and permissions. So all the three all together. In terms of costs, are there corporate and non-for-profit options? Yes, there are. Yes, indeed. I don't remember exactly on top of my head, but I believe the non-profit is 50% of the corporate license. But happy to make the connections and suggest the best pricing for each type of organization. That's it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your feedback also in the chat. Very constructive. And I'm happy to stay around if there are any other questions. Actually, there is another one from Dirk. We're looking at Teams integration, yes, which provides another means for sharing files with non-Dynamics users, which as is positive also means there's no dynamic security role. Any thought in the context of what you're discussing here? Absolutely the same, Dirk. So what we have seen now, Dynamics to SharePoint applies also to Microsoft Teams. And not just Teams. So my social coordinator in screen there, you know what? I'm gonna be extremely generous today. I'm gonna leave you my email address. That's it. Feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to make connections and help you to find the right solution for your problem. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. I'd like to just ask everybody if they could unmute and just give Stefano a round of applause, please. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much. We've got about 10 minutes before the next session, so please feel free to go grab a coffee and then join us. We've got 3 sessions coming up. We've got creating a plugin from scratch, Power Platform, a prayer in time, and modern CI/CD concepts at 12 o'clock. So we've got 10 minutes. Just to answer Ben's question, the recordings are available, and the links will be sent to you in a couple of days' time. Andrew Bibby will be sending all that out to you to show you where to go to get those. But in the meantime, thank you very much, everybody.